Hello and welcome to the third part of my Repairathon. Recently I bought a big box of old mainboards, which I showed in the initial video to this Repairathon. I cleaned the boards from the oxidation, removed some parts and washed the boards with water and soap. After drying a couple of days, the boards were ready for repair, and now I'm releasing videos regularly where I take a closer look at each board, talk about them and try to repair. If you missed last parts, maybe you'd like to watch them as well. And today I would like to take a look at this interesting 286 mainboard with a 16 MHz AMD CPU. It seems to be an ECS 286A mainboard with the highly integrated Acer M1207 chipset, which was also released under the name ALI M1207. A lot of people don't know, but there was a time where Acer was a big player among mainboards chipsets manufacturers, because ALI stands for Acer Laboratories Incorporated, and they made a lot of famous chipsets like the M1541, which was widely used on the Super Socket 7 mainboards for K6-2 and 3 CPUs. One of such boards is even planned for this Repairathon. Later, ALI was renamed into ULI and continued to produce chipsets up to Socket 939 until it was bought by Nvidia in 2006. Let's get back from the history to this mainboard. As you see, the keyboard connector is broken and has to be replaced. It is also wiggling a little bit, so I think it is also broken inside. What else? The BIOS ROM is missing, but it can be found on the Ultimate Retro Project database. This mainboard has a BIOS RTC module, which is unfortunately soldered to the PCB. The battery inside is most probably dead already, so the module has to be desoldered and replaced. This empty socket is for the optional math coprocessor, so we don't need to populate it. Yeah, unfortunately some of the seam memory sockets are broken. There are such plastic clips on the side which keep the memory modules in place, like this one. And those clips seem to be broken off on the lower two slots. The upper two seem to be alright, however. I hate such slots with the plastic clips, and in particular the ones which were used on this board are really hard to find. These are the usual sockets which were used on the most mainboards. They came always in such pairs. Those slots are of much better quality because they have metal clips which are definitely harder to break. Well, as you see, the slots in the more common pair are sitting more tightly to each other than the slots which were used on the board. This was done to reduce the height of the populated memory, since it could be inserted angled and not vertically like with the more common slots. In this case, it doesn't make any difference because the memory slots are out of the way, but I will have a hard time to find a replacement. Now, let's take a closer look at some features which make this board special. First of all, most of the 286 mainboards require a dedicated I/O controller, but some OEM mainboards integrated the controller directly on board. As you see, this board has some integrated serial port and other I/O ports. This is possible thanks to the controller IC. It provides two serial ports, one parallel and one joystick port. This way, no additional ISA card was needed to provide that functionality, and with only 3 ISA slots, this is an important detail for this board. And also an interesting question, why this board has only 3 ISA slots at all? Well, this was an OEM board, which was most probably used in a low-profile desktop case with some kind of Razer card. Furthermore, there is another interesting thing about it. These solder pads for the integrated I/O ports, which made this board interesting for the cases like the AT&T Globalist 515, which I showed once on my channel. So the layout of this 286 board was really much adopted to the interests of the OEMs and the cases which they had to offer. And of course, the integrated IDE and floppy controller was just a logical step in the same direction: cost reduction and universality of the usage. One thing left to mention: this board supports 2 types of RAM, deep RAM ICs as well as SIM. According to the documentation, both memory types can be used simultaneously and give us up to whopping 5 MB of RAM, an incredible amount for the old days, which would cost you a fortune. But today something what could be funny to max out. Of course, then including an FPU as well to get a really crazy 286. But first of all, let's replace the keyboard connector and add a socket to the RTC module. You always want to add some fresh solder to the joints. Believe me, that makes the desoldering job a lot easier. A long time ago I made a couple of videos about my desoldering station. It is a super important tool if you do a lot of repairs. It can save you a lot of time and help to avoid additional damage to the old hardware. But to make it right, you have to clean the desoldering gun regularly. If you don't, the nozzle gets clogged and the pump will not be able to soak the solder properly. This leads to overheating of the PCB and possibly to ripping off the solder pads, so cleaning is very important. To clean the handgun, you have to remove the glass tube, where the residues get collected. First you have to press the button in the end of the gun. This will release the lock on the glass tube. Then you have to push back the tube and pull it out. In the tube there is a rubber cover on the one side and a filter with an aluminium plate on the other. The filter is pressed against the exhaust with a spring. And this blob in the end of the spring is the collected solder mixed with all kinds of dirt, flux, oxide and other residues. I clean the tube, the filter and the spring with a piece of paper towel and sometimes by adding some IPA. I don't change the filter every time, but if I need to, I usually cut it out of some hard fleece, which is usually used under the furniture to protect the floor. Now, what can be done with the residues? Well, I could just throw them away, but I usually collect it in a can. It can be heated up again and all the solder melts together to a relatively clean blob, leaving the dirt and other stuff out. This blob can be used for soldering work again, but you have to use it with an extra on flux. Unlike in the soldering wire, which you can buy in the store, this solder contains almost no flux and is uneasy to use as is. But still, it is quite a lot of solder, and why would you like to waste it? Just as always, don't waste things if you can. We have only one planet. Okay, the handgun is clean again and I can continue desoldering. But unfortunately this still seems not to work well. The desoldering station doesn't soak anymore. This happens more often if you forget to clean the handgun in time. If that happens, you have to heat up the nozzle to 400 degrees Celsius and use such a cleaning wire which was delivered together with the desoldering station. If the nozzle is free again, the desoldering station should be able to easily soak the solder again. You can even hear how it happens. I also will free all the holes, even the unused ones, because I would like to install a socket, and for that I will need all of them. After desoldering, don't just pull on the IC or whatever you want to remove. If there is still some solder inside which holds the pins, you could easily rip off the pads or pull out the wire tubes out of the PCB. That is a damage which you would like to avoid. So take a pair of tweezers and wiggle on the pins a little bit until you feel that they are moving freely. If you did everything right, the part you are trying to remove should come out easily without applying any additional force. And if it doesn't, try to find out which pin is still binding. Add a little bit of fresh solder and repeat the procedure until it is completely free. Now let's replace the keyboard connector and add a socket for the RTC module. I was thinking about to desolder these SIM slots as well, but as I already said, I have currently no replacement at hand. But since 2 of the slots are okay and 2 still have a clip, at least on one side, it should work for testing. I guess I would be able even to use only the 2 good slots for testing, but I have here 4 times 256 kilobytes of RAM. Let's see if they will stay in place at least for now. Yeah, as you see, this one is sitting loosely. The remaining clip on the side doesn't hold it properly in place anymore. It probably also has a crack already. The last module is sitting tightly, even with one clip. Only the third module is wonky, but it remains in place. Maybe it is good enough, at least for testing. I searched in my spare parts a little bit and I found such SIM slots, which don't come in pairs and can be installed separately. I could install these ones instead of at least the 2 broken slots on the board, but I don't like such slots either. They would definitely hold the modules in place better than the broken slots, but usually such slots make a bad contact to the memory modules, resulting in all kind of strange errors. As I said, unfortunately I can't take such more common slots with metal clips because they come in pairs. I could try to cut it in two, but I think that I will just break it, because especially on the edges there is not a lot of space. So I think that I will not change the slots now and see if I can find something better. And if not, I will still be able to use these single slot ones. Okay, let's move on. We will need the BIOS ROM. Fortunately, I could find an image on the Ultimate Retro project. I already have written it to an EEPROM. We will see if it works. And here is the socket which I installed for the RTC module. If you watch my channel regularly, you will probably remember that I have a good alternative for that. But to avoid any possible incompatibilities, I will use the original Delos module for now. It will most probably be not able to save the BIOS settings because of the empty internal battery after so many years, but at least the board should be able to post with it. By the way, without an RTC module, the board would not initialize at all, so we definitely need this. So let's make the first test. We will need the power and a postcode analyzer. The PC speaker is already integrated. Fingers crossed. Okay, the postcode analyzer seems not to detect any codes at all. We see only FF on the display, but there are some beep codes. 8 of them, and that means that a graphics card is missing. So the memory was initialized and the broken slots seem to hold. Let's add a graphics card. The postcode analyzer seems not to make a lot of sense in this board, but I will leave it for now just to use it as an indicator. And a VGA card. Yay, we definitely can hear memory counting clicks. That means that the board is being initialized. That is a very good sign so far. I guess it is time to connect the monitor and the keyboard. And it is alive. CMOS battery state load says, just as expected. The RTC battery is exhausted and will not keep any BIOS settings anymore. Okay, I guess it is time for an upgrade. Let's replace the Delos RTC module with my NW3287 RTC module. If you don't know what this is, feel free to take a look at my video about it. In short, it is a drop-in replacement for such Delos modules. It uses a benchmark RTC IC and a battery holder, which can be easily replaced in the future. So you don't need to change the whole module anymore. You can simply change the battery by inserting a new one. Let's also add a 512 MB compact flash card as a hard drive replacement. The system posts. That means that the RTC module is working fine. And the message about low CMOS battery state disappeared. So let's do some settings. The memory doesn't count up to a megabyte because some memory is shadowed for the system and video BIOS. If you don't know what this means, take a look at my old videos about the XT IDE Universal BIOS. And we are in DOS. Sysinfo says that it is a 286 16 MHz. That is right. The value in the benchmark is pretty low, but hey, this is a 286. But still, it is a good enough machine to play some good old games. Well, and here it is, another 286, ready to be used in a retro PC. I will have to find a replacement for the broken memory slots, but otherwise it is a nice board. It works with my RTC module, and in the future it should be an easy task to change the battery. The IDE port is working too. I didn't test the floppy and I/O ports yet. I will leave it for another day. And this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to give your thumbs up if you did. And so far, I hope to see you on my channel next time for another repair. Thank you and goodbye.